What's good? Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. We are back with another podcast for what's been, a month, maybe two? I don't know how long. With the Muslim Monday Mail with my brother Fahad. And today we have an interesting guest, a little different than what we normally, have. He's an Imam, Imam Youssef Soussi from the Minneapolis area in Minnesota. And we're going to talk about something different today. We're going to talk about TeddyBearIslam. But before that, I'd like to welcome Imam Youssef Soussi onto our show. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum. Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. How are both of you doing today? Alhamdulillah, good?
Alhamdulillah, we're good. Did I miss anything? Was that good?
No, I think you've done fascinating as usual.
All right, that's good. Alhamdulillah. We wanted to talk about this thing called TeddyBearIslam, and I know it's like a weird term. Fahad wanted to come up with a term to describe a phenomenon. And I think you also mentioned, I followed some of your khutbahs and lectures, and I think you do a good job of preaching the sunnah, and mashallah, in a good way. So what we wanted to do was see what insights you have to offer. So before we get into that, Fahad, what is TeddyBearIslam?
So yeah, I coined the term TeddyBearIslam because I wanted to make it poetic and philosophical. So you take a bear. Okay, a bear has fuzzy qualities, and it has negative qualities as well, it's ferocious as well. So just like how Islam, it has Jannah, which is a fuzzy quality, and then it has Jahannam as well, which is kind of the ferocious quality of it. But you take TeddyBearIslam, you eliminate the ferocity of it, and you're only preaching the good parts about it. Right? So you're emphasizing the comfort, and you're reducing the amount of discomfort that's associated with it. So that's why I decided to call it TeddyBearIslam. So it's the idea that Islam has become, at least from khatibs, it's become more soft, and all of the uncomfortable truths that are associated with Islam are being taken away from it. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I think, Sheikh, you mentioned it too in a couple of your videos. I think your khutbah was, is it just the sunnah? I think I remember watching that, and you talked about how, everything is, do I just, people are put off by certain things, Oh, it's just something you don't have to do that. Just stay away from that, So yeah, we'd like to see what's your take on this? Why is it, that a lot of the people in our community only mention just the good and not the bad? And we're not saying, don't be just be a hater. But we are saying, and there should be a balance of both.
Well, first of all, I want to get your take on the term. What do you think about the term that I made? You think it's accurate?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala ashraf al-anbiya wal mursaleen. First, jazakum Allah khair, may Allah reward you both immensely for everything that you all do. I know this is taken out of your time, it takes energy, it takes a lot of preparation. So I ask Allah in return to reward you, both of you, abundantly in the dunya and in the after. Allahumma ameen. In terms of the term TeddyBearIslam, I could not agree with it more. It's a very, very creative word, but I think it really hits the nail on the head. I mean, that's kind of what we're forging for ourselves today, is a narrative that it's harmonious with that title, TeddyBearIslam. And as you said earlier, mashallah, that there's this narrative that's growing and it's gaining acceptance out there, and that is that only talk about the good, but things that are going to take the Muslim congregation out of its comfort zone, then you should stay away from that. And if you happen to talk about that, or if you're somewhat critical, then you're all of a sudden marginalized. You're placed in a category that, it takes almost forever for you to get out of. So it's somewhat threatening to even one's career if, there are just certain topics that are a complete red line topic. Do not talk about it. We don't care how you talk about it, in what tone, what time, you're not to talk about it, period. And that becomes very, very difficult. So not to shy away too much, I think you spot on. TeddyBearIslam, I think that's what we're slowly but surely kind of merging ourselves into. So yes.
So Sheikh, what are some topics, for example, that khatibs tend to shy away from in khutbahs?
Okay, in terms of the topics really, they vary from one another. But there's a golden rule. Anything that is going to make the people feel somewhat uncomfortable and is going to make them take themselves out of their comfort zone, that in itself is shandan. So for example, you have khutbahs that have to do with the punishment. Anything that has to do with punishment, and again, making people feel somewhat uncomfortable. So for instance, if we talk about the hellfire, Jahannam, that is a turnoff for a lot of people, even though it's a reality. Like no one can deny that Jahannam is haqq. And even as I say, I remember growing up in elementary school, you said the word hell, and that was frowned on. Like, you're not supposed to say the word hell, right? You're supposed to say H-E double hockey stick. And I would talk to myself, hell is not a bad word. It's a bad place to be in, but it's not necessarily a bad word, you see? So when you talk about hell, it makes people feel uncomfortable, but it's a reality. It's a haqq. When you talk about adab al-qabr, when you talk about the punishment of the grave, which according to Ahlul Sunnah wal Jama'ah, it's not a metaphor, it's a reality. It's a haqq. Allahu alam how it's going to be, but the reality of adab al-qabr is real. It's truth. Anything I think that has to do also with who defines the Islamic attire, whether it be for men or whether it be for women. So for instance, that's a red line topic. Talking about hijab, for instance, if you talk about hijab, the purpose of hijab, let's say the conditions of hijab, let's say you use great etiquette, it's the right terminology, it's the proper way, it's the good, kind, loving, caring, passionate delivery, compassionate delivery, it's still not going to resonate and sit well with many people, because that in itself now is viewed as being judgmental, and you're pointing the finger, and who are you to tell, and you don't know our struggles. It reminds me of the whole Muslim convenience card, right? Even though it's out of love and compassion that you're telling people that this is not the way it ought to be, it should be done a different way. So these are the topics that people just don't want to hear about. Another topic too is, for instance, riba. Talking about riba, usury or interest. People don't want to hear that topic. Things where you're somewhat critical, but they need to be addressed. And it's the responsibility of who? We, the imams, the khatibs, the scholars, the lecturers, the leaders of the community. It is our responsibility to speak about these topics. So in short, anything that is going to take someone out of his or her comfort zone, that is frowned on, even if it's haqq, even if it's truth.
Yeah, I think you mentioned, I just want to jump on what you said about hell. Like, you had a tweet, right? I think it was something like, Sheikh, can you talk about hell in a nice way next time? I
wrote that a while back.
Yeah, a long time ago. But like, yeah, it's absolutely true. Like, it's something bad, but it needs to be addressed. And then the point you made about anything that makes Muslims uncomfortable, right? Like hijab is an excellent example, you know, because people, they don't want to hear about their flaws, right? They don't want to hear that I'm wrong. They don't want to accept it. And like, just the world we live in today, the cultures that promotes degeneracy and, you know, kind of is already pulling people away from Islam. The imams, like you said, which is great, they need to address these things, because if they don't, then it's further downhill, because you can't, like, there's going to be things in Islam that you have to accept, right? So, but then a lot of these imams would say, well, we don't want to push them away, we want to soften their hearts first, and then we will pull them in. So
yeah, but then the question is, how long are you going to soften their hearts for, right?
Yeah.
Like, when are you going to actually get to the meat of things and like start actually trying to fix your community rather than just trying to like make them feel good all the time, right?
If I might add to that, I mentioned this in the khutbah a few times. I said, in terms of that logic, just for argument's sake, let us assume that, okay, this is the hikmah, because a lot of people will convince themselves that it is of wisdom that I'm not speaking about this. It is of wisdom that I'm not bringing this to light. I'm shoving it under the carpet, and it's only a matter of time until I come out to my community. So do you put these on the side for what, a year, a few months, a decade or two, and then later on, after you have a whole new generation now that's completely oblivious to a lot of the very basic, elementary, rudimentary teachings of Islam, and you say, dear community, all of you now are spiritually mature enough to handle what I'm going to deliver to you right now. Allah says this, the messenger says that. You guys get where I'm going with this?
When do you know?
I think that's going to be more of a shock, that you've waited for so long and you've come after this long period of time, and now you think to yourself, okay, now I'm going to be frank, candid, and real and honest with my congregation and tell them that, hey, you know what? I've been keeping this from all of you for so many years, but that's because we're growing together, we're spiritually growing together, we're maturing together, and now I think you guys are finally ready to take in such material. I think that's going to be more damaging at the fact that this information has been held from them for so many years, and all of a sudden it's now. I don't think that's going to resonate with them. I think that's going to be such a shock for any of them to take it in and say, well, alhamdulillah, you're right. I think that's more, it does more damage and more harm than good, irrespective of how much people see it as of wisdom. And I definitely think it's not.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent way of putting it, where, because it's like you're changing tones almost, right? Like you said, first you're being all nice, and then, okay, 10 years later, you're like, guess what? This is what Islam says about health. Guess what? This is what Islam says about, like, you know, like rights of men and women in marriages. And guess what? Like, it just, everything that contradicts today's values is just, it's going to invoke insane levels of, like, dissonance in, like, people, right? They're just going to have a tough time accepting it. So
if I may add also, brothers, and that is that I'm for taking baby steps, but when we're talking about baby steps, we're talking about baby steps in a decent, timely fashion. In other words, we're not talking about a decade or two, and all of a sudden, hey, I think you're ready now. I'm for an imam taking baby steps with his congregation, letting them know about the basic things, and then kind of growing with them spiritually, slowly but surely. But how long are we talking here? I think that's the $1 million question. How long are we talking? You'll give 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 lectures, and you're still telling yourself, well, it's not the time right now. Well, when is the time? I'm definitely for the idea of a congregation being familiar, because yes, there are certain things where people will not accept from you because they're not familiar with who you are. They don't know you yet. But I think after a few months, you're an imam there, you're a lecturer, you're a khatib, you're a scholar. I think after a month, 2, 3 months, a year, I think at maximum, you should be able to, you know, there's that comfort enough, there's that comfort level where it's enough where you should be able to say what Islam says, and your congregation in return should be receptive of such content.
Mm-hmm. I mean, like,
yeah, that makes sense. Oh, so is that the approach you take, like at your mosque?
I try, and it's still difficult. It's really, really difficult because picking these topics, people are just not going to like it, irrespective of how long you've known them for. It's just, these are topics that people just don't like. But again, it's a matter of responsibility. It is my responsibility to convey يا أيها الرسول بلغ ما أنزل إليك من ربك وإن لم تفعل فما بلغت رسالته. Right? Allah says, O Messenger, convey what has been given to you, and if you don't convey, then you didn't convey the message. In other words, if you're going to convey it as piecemeal and not as an integral product or integral system or approach, then you really didn't do the full job clearly, right?
correct.
Yeah.
And I'm definitely not for going, for instance, I'm also not for, you know, the brother who accepts Islam, and I'm like, okay, you have to now go shorten your garment, you have to not touch your beard tomorrow, starting from tomorrow now, because you're a Muslim now. That's
yeah.
Right?
No, you're pretty balanced. Yeah, you nailed it.
That's exaggerated. And so you're always going to have two extremes. You're going to have one extreme to the right, one extreme to the left, and what Islam always offers is a middle path.
Mm-hmm. But the middle path in today's time is going to be extreme because of the society we live in, isn't it?
That's kind of, unfortunately, that's as Muslims, that's I think where we've fallen short, is we're taking societal norms, normative behavior, cultural normative behavior to be our benchmark, and that's utterly wrong.
Yeah. Fahd, I think you had a question?
Yeah, basically my question was, we know that in sales, there's this one saying that you're supposed to assume the sale. So like you're supposed to basically applying that idea into khutbahs. So like assuming that your jama'ah or your congregation is already spiritually developed enough to kind of accept what you're about to say to them. So like just assuming that they're okay with you talking about health, or they're okay with you talking about, for example, women's issues, even though you're like a male imam and you're going to be quote unquote like mansplaining to them. So just going ahead and just taking off the Band-Aid really, really quickly. That's what I'm getting at. And then as long as you're saying stuff that's Islamically legitimate, at least in my mind, you'll be good to go. Right? What do you guys think about that? Rather than, basically, I'm just saying that remove the idea of baby steps and just go all out.
I'm against that to a certain degree. That is that, for instance, if I go to a congregation that I'm not familiar with. It's my first time. I'm visiting a community. It is not of wisdom. I agree. It is not of wisdom for me to talk about the conditions of hijab, or for me to talk about, women's issues, or for me to talk about anything that's going to put anybody there in an uncomfortable position, right? I'd rather talk about neutral things such as being patient, salat, generic topics. I call these generic topics. Being obedient to your mother. I'd say about 95% of the times, if you go into any given message at any given khutbah, you're probably going to hear one of the following topics about salat, which is important. No, and this does not mean that I'm here to undermine these topics, ma'adallah. But what I'm getting at here is that these topics are somewhat recycled. They're generic, about patience, about salat, about being good to thy parents, right? Good to the neighbors. That you probably 98% of the time is probably being good to thy neighbor in America, right? Which I'm all for. We're all for. No one is to deny that. But moving out of there, again, going back to that, I think I'd pick one of these topics. We're about the mercy of Allah. All of us like that. If you go on YouTube right now, 90, maybe 95% of the lectures are about, and we need the mercy of Allah. We all do, for sure, right? But I'll pick one of these topics. But I'm not going to go to a community that I'm not familiar with, and they're not familiar with me, and start talking about things that's going to make them feel uncomfortable. That definitely lacks wisdom.
Yeah.
But with my own community, I'm still optimistic that I can talk about things that are going to put them at unease to a certain degree. But I would hope that at the end of the day, they do realize and they do come to terms that, it's out of love that this person is speaking to us. It's out of love that maybe he was aggressive. And I don't call it being aggressive. It's called being passionate about your topic.
It's kind of like a tough love. Like, for example, when a father scolds his child, right? He's doing that because he loves his child, right? Not because he actually dislikes his child. No. Would you say it's kind of like that?
Yeah. And here's the thing too, is for some, even though we're kind of getting into a whole different topic, but it seems to me that it's acceptable for a politician, and I never understood why, but it's completely acceptable for a politician to go on a rant, seeking justice, seeking truth, seeking, solving problems, right? And they go on a rant, and everybody hears it, and people are just delighted and elated and absolutely excited. Tell them, you go, mashallah. But when it seems that when we do this as khatibs for the sake of Allah, it doesn't register with the Muslim community the same way.
How so? Like, can you expand on that?
Like when people are marching or screaming, or you have a speaker that's tough and rough at the Senate House, and we look at that and we appreciate that. We're like, well, at least we have someone who's passionate. At least we have someone who's real, right? But then, all of a sudden, when you take the same approach at the minbar, you're viewed as this monster, as this arrogant monster. And I ask myself, why is it okay for politicians to be, praised for that? But when a Muslim does the very same thing, and we're passionate for the sake of God, we're passionate for the sake of God, not for the sake of a government, not for the sake of a person. We're passionate for the sake of God. So that should be embraced even more. So I find there's somewhat of a duplicity going on here that's inexplicable to this very moment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, because it's like, when you go to like a rally, or like just for any of these things, like, they'll make fun of Trump, and it's like, oh yeah, he said that, yeah. And then when the khatib's like, like, fear Allah, and like, oh, and then we'll talk about the punishment and the grade, then it's like, oh man, this guy's too judgmental, blah 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 blah. It's like, I personally believe it's like a 21st century American thing. Like your convenience card, don't judge me, only God can judge me. It's like, okay, I do what I want, but like what you're doing affects all of us and affects society. And we have to hold ourselves accountable for our actions, right? So I think it's definitely right.
No, but he was actually, I can't talk about it. So I was thinking that Sheikh was actually trying to get at that there's less hype inside the masjid rather than outside the masjid for other secular causes.
Oh, that's good.
No, it's the way it registers, right? Why is it we're so? In other words, we lend the extended hand out to politicians. Mm-hmm. We extend the courtesy to the politicians, or to anybody, right? Anybody who's at a rally, like when people are screaming, in the streets and they're rallying and they're protesting, the more you yell, the higher the pitch of your voice is, the more love and props and credit you get.
Mm.
Get him, yeah, get him, boy, get right. But if the khatib does this at the masjid, and there's this, it's starting to permeate our culture even more in the masajid, is that, you know, and I've seen a few videos, and I'm not going to mention any, which is somewhat bothersome, and that is that if you yell at the masjid, well, I left Islam because the khatib was always yelling. Give me a break.
Isn't actually go on?
No, I've seen this at a few different places, and it's starting to kind of gain more and more acceptance that, you know, it's even myself, I subconsciously sometimes as I'm speaking, I'm like, oh, okay, well, you know, you might get that person, I might say, well, you're the reason my daughter left Islam, or you're the reason my son left Islam. And all of a sudden, you now as a khatib, you have to put yourself in check that, no, if you're going to yell, you're going to scare people away. When it's like, okay, well, now you guys we're looking for actors more than we are looking for khatibs, right? Our intention as khatibs is not to turn people away. It's not to turn people off. But again, that person, that politician is extended the courtesy. It registers with them. Oh, they're just passionate about their topic. Well, hello. Why not extend the same courtesy and the same justification to your khatib or imam?
We also know that there was a hadith in which the Prophet, he used to scream until he would become red in the face when he was giving his khutbahs.
Precise. Yes. He وكأنه احمرت وجنته, right? احمرت وجنته وكأنه منذر جيش يقول صبحكم ومساكم. His cheeks or his eyes would get red. وعلى صوته, his voice would, you know, it'll get high. His voice would be high. It'd have a high pitch. His eyes would get red, or his cheeks would get red. وكأنه منذر جيش. It's as if he's a leader, a warner of an army, saying, hey, this army is now, you know, coming for you guys. So the Prophet ﷺ, he wasn't, even his approach, even his da'wah, and again, I mean, look at it here, right? You have these people for 30 minutes out of the whole week. Out of how many hours are there in a week? Allahu A'lam, but we're talking about 7 days. You have only 30 minutes. You definitely want to make sure that what you say resonates with them. Like, for instance, I can't be talking about hellfire, and then the brother tells you, well, hey, brother, it's a sunnah to smile. I can't talk to you about the hellfire and smile at the same time. It's far from realistic, but sometimes you're like, what are you guys asking for exactly? Hey, you know, Jahannam, guys, is a very, very hot place. Stay away. You know, and guys, I mean, come on. It doesn't. It's not. They don't go. They're not harmonious. They don't go. They don't go in parallel with each other. Smiling and talking about the hellfire. No, I'm not supposed to smile. It's supposed to resonate with you that when you think of the hellfire, you're like, wow, this is some serious business here.
Yeah, like you should feel uncomfortable. Like you should feel like terrified when you hear about it, right? Because that's the whole point, right? Because we need both.
Yeah, that is the whole. Yeah, that is the whole point. Here's the thing. We want people sometimes, and again, there has to be a balance. And I'm sure Brother Fed is going to bring this up later. Is that we want people to get out of their comfort zones. We want that introspection going on. We want that, you know, that self-talk and mechanism taking place. Like, man, I need to really get myself together. SubhanAllah, the Khatib said ABC or XYZ. We want you to leave kind of feeling like, I really need to get myself together here.
Precisely.
Yeah.
You know, even human beings are motivated by both reward and punishment. And you take a person who's running, okay, if you put a candy store in front of him, he's not going to run as fast than if you were to put like hungry dogs behind him, right? So sometimes you need punishment in order to motivate someone, and sometimes you need incentive in order to motivate someone. And like, for example, Jannah is the incentive, and Jahannam is the punishment that you're trying to avoid, right?
Yeah.
And even in the brain, we learned, like, I'm a neuroscience major, by the way. So in punishments is associated with fear in one of the brain regions called the amygdala, and pleasure is associated with another brain structure. It's called the nucleus accumbens, right? And these are two different mechanisms by which, like, the brain learns and it associates actions with consequences.
You know, I'm glad you brought that part up, because here's when you look at the Quran, if you look at the Quranic discourse, when you look at the Quranic approach to incentive and deterrent, you always find that they're both coupled together, right? When Allah talks about wa'ad and wa'id, wa'ad meaning the promise of Allah, and wa'id meaning the punishment of Allah. You always find that in the Quran, if Allah's talking about the wa'ad, right thereafter, he's going to talk about the wa'id. Or if he talks about the wa'id, immediately after that, he's going to talk about the wa'ad. And I mean, the Quran is filled with this, right? So, for instance, in Surah An-Nisa, Allah says, وَمَن يُطِعِ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ يُدْخِلْهُ جَنَّاتٍ. And whomsoever obeys Allah and His Messenger, he'll be taken into paradise. Immediately right after that, He says, وَمَن يَعْصِ اللَّهَ وَرَسُولَهُ وَيَتَعَدَّ حُدُودَهُ يُدْخِلْهُ نَارًا خَالِدًا فِيهَا, to the end of the verse. And whomsoever disobeys Allah and His Messenger and transgresses the boundaries of Allah and His Messenger. So you see, you have whomsoever obeys, what's the reward? Paradise. Whomsoever disobeys, he'll have excruciating pain awaiting him. You also find in Surah, for example, in Surah Ibrahim, Allah talks about the Prophet ﷺ commanding him to convey to his people, نَبِّئْ عِبَادِي أَنِّي أَنَا الْغَفُورُ الرَّحِيمُ وَأَنَّ عَذَابِي هُوَ الْعَذَابُ الْأَلِيمُ. Convey to them, inform them, O Messenger of Allah, that I am the most gracious, most merciful. But also inform them, O Muhammad, that my punishment is severe. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't say, just tell them about my mercy and that's enough for them, O Muhammad. Don't talk to them about my punishment because that's a huge turnoff. He doesn't say that. So there is definitely a balance. For instance, in Surah Al-Zumar, Allah talks about the disbelieving batch, right? He says, وَسِيقَ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا إِلَى جَهَنَّمَ زُمَرًا. The disbelievers are sought in a batch to the hellfire. Right after that, he talks about the believing people. وَسِيقَ الَّذِينَ اتَّقَوْا رَبَّهُمْ إِلَى الْجَنَّةِ زُمَرًا. And those who feared their Lord are brought to the paradise in batches. So you talk about those who disbelieve, and immediately he talks about those who believe. Now there's another verse, I'll end with this inshallah, that is found in Surah Hud, where Allah says, فَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ شَقُوا فَفِي النَّارِ لَهُمْ فِيهَا زَفِيرٌ وَشَهِيقٌ. The wretched ones will be in the hellfire. And then he talks about وَأَمَّا الَّذِينَ سُعِدُوا فَفِي الْجَنَّةِ. But the felicitated ones will be in paradise. Now notice every time there is the promise, there's also the punishment. Or if there's the punishment, right after that it's followed by the reward. So you find this, the wa'ad and the wa'id, these are two inextricably linked together.
Right.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say that I'm not sure if there was a hadith or a riwayah that there's like three types of Muslims. That there's those who basically they do good for the sake of trying to get into Jannah. Those who do good trying to save themselves from the hellfire. And then those who worship Allah and do good for the sake of worshiping Allah and doing good.
This is a very good point. This is actually, it's an athar. There are certain people, you find is some of the Sufis that say this, ما نعبد الله خوفا من ناره ولا نعبده رجاء ولا طمعا في جنته ولكن نعبده لأننا نحبه. We don't worship Allah because we fear His hell, and we don't worship Him because we want His pleasure. We only worship Him because we love Him. And of course, this is very, very contrary to the Quran itself, because Allah says, He says, فَادْعُوهُ خَوْفًا وَادْعُوهُ خَوْفًا وَطَمَعًا. Call unto your Lord, khawfan, meaning out of fear of His punishment. وَطَمَعًا is that you're seeking His reward, which is Jannah, and of course the greatest pleasure in Jannah is seeing the face of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Yeah.
So and even Allah, when He talks about Yahya, right, in Surah Al-Anbiya, He says, كَانُوا يَدْعُونَنَا رَغَبًا وَرَهَبًا رَغَبًا فِي الْجَنَّةِ وَرَهَبًا مِنَ النَّارِ. Right? They used to call out to us, talking about the Anbiya, they used to worship us, they used to hasten to that which is good, out of fear of the hell, and also seeking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, seeking Allah's pleasure.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess I just wanted to ask you about this. Oh wait, did you have another point to finish?
I did, but here's something that we really have to contemplate on, and that is that if we as Muslims, we're saying, we're at the da'wah tables, we're at the conventions, we're everywhere, we're telling people, here's, for instance, I got a Quran with me, right? We're telling people that, hey, dear Muslim, this is your way to salvation. Believe in this book. Believe in this book verbatim, everything that's in it. It is the verbatim word of God. everything that is in here is what you'll need to be saved. I find it hard for me to kind of convince someone of believing in it if we ourselves, it seems to me that we as Muslims, we have not truly embodied everything that is in this Quran. Like, if the Quran is really viable for all places and all times, then are we to say that Allah did not do a good enough job? Because he's talking about hellfire and punishment and excruciating, agonizing pain, but he's also talking about love, his mercy, his compassion, and so forth. Because the Quran seems to be, these two things are linked together. So if we're here trying to give da'wah to people and we're saying, hey, you have to read the Quran, you have to read the Quran, the question for us Muslims, have we as Muslims, have we truly embodied this message? Yes or not?
Yeah. So, have we truly embodied it? And if we did truly embody it, we would not have issues with, when a Hadith does talk about punishment, or when we read about it, we'll get, like, just like when we hear stories of Sahaba and how, like, they're eager to please Prophet ﷺ. They're eager to imitate him, right? They're eager to do like follow him as an example, and they're eager to please Allah. And when they heard about the punishment, their hearts would get soft, right? They would cry. And then you have people like us, or like in today's time, hell is like a joke, right? Like, so I wanted to like touch on that where you said the verse that you mentioned about like fear, like of hellfire, and then love of Allah for the rewards. That those are what we're supposed to have, right?
I mean, if here's the thing, if Allah is speaking to us with that language, should we not also speak to people with the same language? If the Quran is really, if the Quran in itself is from Allah, and Allah is the most wise, because we always talk about, there's always this, I don't want to call it an alibi, but it's somewhat as a justifier. That is, people, they always say, brother, use wisdom. And for some people, wisdom for them means don't talk about this subject, period.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's not the tone, it's not the delivery, it's not the body language. No, it's more of, hey, hikmah for them is not speaking about this period. Why? Because the end result for some of them is that some of the young brothers or sisters might leave the masjid. So, well, what about the others? But not to go too far, I want to quote with you also in terms of the messengers, right? Now, the Prophet ﷺ, Allah says in many places in the Quran, وَمَا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ إِلَّا كَافَةً لِلنَّاسِ بَشِيرًا وَنَذِيرًا. Right? In Surah Al-Ahzab, Allah says, يَا أَيُّهَا النَّبِيُّ إِنَّا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ شَاهِدًا وَمُبَشِّرًا وَنَذِيرًا. In Surah Al-Fath, Allah says, إِنَّا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ شَاهِدًا وَمُبَشِّرًا وَنَذِيرًا. And even in Surah Al-Kahf, right? وَمَا نُرْسِلُ الْمُرْسَلِينَ إِلَّا مُبَشِّرِينَ وَمُنذِرِينَ, right? So you find both of these, you have both of these always connected. When Allah talks about the messengers, they talk about the mubashir is the person who gives glad tidings. The nadhir is a warner.
Right. It's both. Yeah.
So you have, there's a combination together, right? The mubashir and a nadhir, right? You're giving glad tidings, but you're also warning the people. I have to plug this in 1 second. I would just mention in a few verses that even the messenger, right? The messengers and messenger, they're warners. They warn the people, but they also give glad tidings, right? So these two, again, these are two together, right? You don't have where a Rasul is a mubashir, but he's not a nadhir, right? So I mean, if that's the job of the messengers, right? Because Allah even says actually something different in Surah Nuh. He says, إِنَّا أَرْسَلْنَا نُوحًا إِلَىٰ قَوْمِهِ أَنْ أَنذِرْ قَوْمَكَ مِنْ عَذَابٍ أَلِيمٍ, right? إِنَّا أَرْسَلْنَاكَ, O Nuh, we have sent you to your people as a nadhir, to warn them. He doesn't even mention to give them glad tidings, but here in Surah Nuh, he says, إِنَّا أَرْسَلْنَا نُوحًا إِلَىٰ قَوْمِهِ أَنْ أَنذِرْ قَوْمَكَ مِنْ عَذَابٍ أَلِيمٍ, right?
أَنذِرْ قَوْمَكَ, yeah.
من قبل أن يأتيهم أنذر قومك من قبل أن يأتيهم.
Yeah, that was the. Yeah. So you just pointed out that he mentioned warning first.
Yeah, and then he says, قال يا قومي إني لكم نذير مبين. He says, "Oh my people, I am for you a clear warner." What is he warning them from? Right? From Allah's wrath and Allah's punishment that no one can deny.
Yes.
You see, so if this is the job of the messengers, if you're saying that I'm going to follow in the footsteps of the messengers, then you have to. You have no alternative, no other option but to talk about Allah's wrath, but also talk about Allah's love and mercy, right? There's a combination. There has to be a balance. And I think this is all we're calling for. We're not calling for you to have a 10-lecture series about Allah's wrath.
Yeah.
Yeah, seriously, please. And if you're an imam, if you're an upcoming imam, don't do that. People don't need that. I don't think you need to have a 10-lecture series about Allah's wrath and punishment. No, there needs to be a balance. This is all we're asking for.
Yeah. I like how you mentioned this. So no, because after the warning, like after he says, "I'm a warner," and then I think the 3 verses later, right? He says, "Yaghfir lakum min dhunubikum wa yakhluqukum ila ajalin musamma," like, and Allah will forgive you, right? Like he goes into like the positive incentives, right? And then later on in the surah, I think he mentions like you talk about the reward of Jannah and stuff. So
that's always found in the Quran. Yes, paradise and hell. You're always going to find those together. If you're going to see hell, you're probably going to see paradise and vice versa.
Yeah, and I think it's because Allah knows us. He knows that we need both, right? We need that both for proper motivation.
And again, you remember earlier when I said, have we truly embodied the Quran or not? Because Quran it's real. It's real. In other words, it acknowledges for instance, it acknowledges the human psyche. It acknowledges how men are. It acknowledges how women are. It acknowledges how kids are. It understands. I mean, how can it not? I mean, the one giving us the Quran is the same one who created us.
Yes.
So it has to be an effective method.
I mean, logically, yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But we don't see that as much in the masajid as much as we should.
Yeah.
Why do you think that is?
Yeah, why do you think there's this idea of Islam is love, Islam is just mercy, Islam is just, or not even Islam, or even like when there's explicit things in the text where it talks about certain rights of certain individuals, especially in marriage, and it always talks about only one side. Is it kind of the result of today's world we live in, and it's just Western? Is it the result of khatibs just maybe because of stereotypes of Muslims being oppressive? Is it as a result of those things, and the khatibs are scared for a backlash and stuff? Like, what do you think it is as an imam?
I mean,
don't get me. Yes, Fahad, go ahead.
I was going to say, it's not even just not talking about Jahannam, right?
Yeah, it goes into other things.
It goes into exactly. It goes into other facets of Islam, right? That we just don't want to talk about.
That just contradict like 21st century values. Like, just like certain hadith that might not even be necessarily bad, where it's like, a woman who obeys her husband will go to Jannah. And no, if you like that's something that's like, why would I like? That's something considered bad or backwards, right? Why and they can't even say that. So what's your take on that?
Here's what I mean. Those are so many questions, mashallah. Each of you asked about 3 questions each, which is okay. How can I go about this in such a way that it's fair and balanced? There has to be a fair and balanced approach for the women and for the men as well. So for instance, if yes, in terms of the backlash, there is always going to be that. But you as a khatib, as an imam, as a scholar, if you're going to take the perks, then you have to handle the heat in the kitchen as well. In other words, if you want to, you know what I mean? I mean, because I'm a public speaker. I get invited to other places, to other towns and other organizations. It happens, yes. And it comes with a price tag. In other words, yes, people are going to point the finger at you. You're Mr. Known. Oh, the sheikh, please come and sit here. Sheikh, can I book your flight? And I mean, we all love to be respected and we all like to be honored. But of course, for that knowledge that you possess and you carry, people are definitely dealing with you with what's the word? With tender hands, right? They're definitely dealing with you with a greater deal of delicacy simply because of the knowledge that you possess and have, right? So, and then the first class hotel rooms, the first class trips and stuff like that, and then the honorariums, and so you're honored. Oh, you're the sheikh, huh?
Sounds like a nice career option.
No, I mean, really, and this is something that, okay, but at the same time, I would feel I would feel as a sham or as a charlatan if that's all I'm looking forward to as a speaker. But then I'm not going to speak about certain things, not because it's not the truth, not because it's not the reality, but because people don't want to hear it. I feel like, okay, if I'm going to take the perks, I have to take the whiplash that goes along, right? Not because I want it, not because I'm looking forward to it, not because I want to make more enemies at the khutbah, but I have to take both. I mean, for me to sleep well at night, I have to take both. That'll be such an intellectually dishonest proposition for me to say, I'm doing this because when people see me, they stand up and they point the fingers at me. Oh, the sheikh is here, mashallah, we love your lectures. And man, can you come over and have dinner? All that is good. But okay, there's another side to that. And I have to be willing to face that other side. You see?
Yeah. You continue. Go ahead.
A few things to add. No, go ahead. Add on that, please.
Yeah, I was just gonna add on to what you were saying. Like how you said, like you want the good and the bad. You want to take both, like, right? Because you're like as an imam, you're a community leader, so you have to be. You're responsible, right, for the pack, basically, right? Like yeah, you can't have like both. You can't just have your cake and eat it, right? You have to like deal with the backlash, but you also have to you also get to like accept the perks. And by backlash, I mean like sometimes you have to say things that are necessary, right? Just like when a parent says, "Hey, son, you can't play video games till 12 p.m." And yeah, his kid's gonna be angry at him till like maybe tomorrow, but the parent has to make that decision. So it's kind of the same thing as a community leader.
And like anything else, and this is not rocket science. Any job description, any position, it's going to come with its pros and it's also going to come with its cons. But if I just want, here's the thing, if I as a khatib, as an imam, not that all I want, but by default position is you're going to be center stage, you're going to be in the limelight, you're going to be the one speaking in front of crowds, you're going to be the one who people are going to know. And of course that can be a good thing or a bad thing, but you're going to be in the limelight, you're going to be known, you're going to be invited, you're going to be pampered, you're going to be dealt with delicate hands. And of course, that's something that everybody likes, right? We're not saying whether it's good or bad, but we all like to be respected and honored. But and we don't do it as a public speaker. I don't want someone to misunderstand me here and decontextualize my words here and misconstrue what I'm trying to get at here. All I'm getting is that we don't do it for that pampering, but doing that job, that comes along with it by default, right? It's like an incentive package. But at the same time, that is a huge responsibility as well, is that to be fair, if you're going to, take those incentives and if you're going to embrace those perks, we ask, please, that you also understand that there's also kind of a darker side to this public speaking job or public speaking career. That is that sometimes you're going to have to tell people things that they don't want to hear.
Precisely. I would also add that, like, for example, the bigger the audience, a lot of our community leaders have, and a lot of the celebrity shuyukh have, the bigger the audience they have, the more people they have to please, and the more sensitive they become, right? Would you agree with that?
Yes, without a doubt. And it's a fitna. It is a huge, huge fitna. But, as I say, to whom much is given, much is expected.
Precisely.
Really, to whom much is given, much is expected. If and that's the thing, that we should not look at this public speaking. It's a mas'uliyah, right? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He took the responsibility from us, from the people who go and study at the madrasas, for people who go and memorize the Quran, and for people who sit there and study and memorize and revise and research and everything that goes along with that. It is the responsibility of the person of knowledge, of the imam, of the khatib, of the scholar, to convey to the people the content. So our job as speakers is to convey to the people what the truth is.
Mm-hmm.
And it definitely gets scary when you get to such a level. You start thinking, and again, this kind of intertwines with the other question, is that, well, if I say ABC, maybe this organization is not going to invite me again. If I talk about this, maybe people will unfollow my page. If I talk about this topic, well, this is probably going to go all around the world, and I'm really, really going to be disliked. These are things, these are considered new phenomena. Like, as an imam back in the early, I'd say 90s, give or take, you talked about things and that was it. People left the masjid and said, man, subhanAllah, Allah, the Sheikh gave it to us today. We really got to get our, we got to tie our boots, we have to tie our belts, and we have to really get serious, right? You didn't leave the masjid saying, oh, that guy was judgmental. I didn't like the way he talked. He was kind of rude. He was awfully aggressive. This didn't happen before. You left the masjid, and that was it. Right? And even before the advent of the computers, you didn't go on the internet seeing what other mashayikh said about that situation, or, okay, this guy may be a strict. There was none of that. That didn't happen. You left the masjid, right? And I don't want to say you didn't care what people said, because as a speaker, I care dearly what other people think. But is in terms of compromising the truth, I'm sorry, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. And I believe I think the bigger platform Allah gives you, the greater the responsibility. So I'm not gonna lie, it's a two-edged sword, right? To think that you have all these followers. Well, am I looking to please these followers, or am I really looking to get them, to the best of my ability, get them closest to Allah's pleasure, and remove them to the best of my ability from God's wrath and punishment? Mm-hmm. Right? And I have to think good of my Muslim brothers out there, that they're doing it, but it's very, very tricky, and it's very, very easy from missing the bullseye and telling ourselves that, well, it's not of wisdom to talk about ABC because I have so-and-so followers. Well, think again. These followers are not going to benefit us. These followers are not going to be with us in our graves, So I ask Allah to give us strength when that comes along, because it's a huge fitna. I ask Allah to preserve me, and as well as the other du'at and the other brothers out there, and sisters as well.
I mean, all right, yeah. So one of the things that's I found strange, like I think you mentioned this earlier. You talked about how there's like generic topics, right? There's patience, there's salah, there's obedience to parents, there's being nice to your neighbor. I want to touch on the obedience to the parents part, and what's interesting is that we accept obedience to parents very easily, but when you mention obedience to the husband, suddenly everyone flips out, right? And is that the fault of speakers that's not wanting to say it? Is that the fault of just today's society? I think, yeah, I mean, I mentioned this a couple times, but it's just a bit strange that one thing is accepted very readily, right? Very readily is it accepted that a mother 3 times. Very readily is accepted that obey your parents. But obeying husband, it's like,
I'm surprised you'd even go that way, but that is true. That that topic in itself seems, it's probably the scariest topic a khatib can ever talk about.
Exactly.
It really is. No. If you want your career to be ruined, that's probably the way to go. Okay. Having said that, though, it's interesting that you mentioned that, because when you look at the concept of the concept of obedience, right, in the Quran or even in the Sunnah, there are many sound hadith that talk about a woman's obedience, for instance, for her husband. Now, I do understand that there are many cases of abuse out there, all right? But I personally remember speaking with a gentleman before, and I proposed that topic just as a proposal. And he said to me, well, you know what, Sheikh, there was a woman who called just a few days ago and complained about her husband abusing her, so I don't think that's an ideal topic. I didn't find that to be a convincing argument, because I thought to myself, I said, well, what if I called him and I said, hey, you know what, Sheikh, I want to talk today about a man's good character and obedience and good etiquette and good manners towards his wife. I'm sure he's not going to tell me, well, actually, Sheikh, you know what? A brother called a few days ago complaining that his wife dogged him out and she'd done him wrong, so I don't think that's a good subject to pick. He'll never say such a thing.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not even it's not even obedience. It's also like the hadith that a woman who prays her salahs, who fasts, who obeys her husband will go to Jannah. Sorry, it's something like that, right?
No, it's Hadith Ahmad min Hadith Abdurrahman ibn Auf. Now, my pet peeve with that is that, okay, these are ahadith. Like, as a believing man and as a believing woman, this is not necessarily meant to push a specific agenda. Now, me speaking to a non-Muslim crowd or addressing a non-Muslim audience, I can definitely understand why they would have a problem with this hadith.
Yes.
Well, who does he think he is? And who the hell does he think he is? And who am I to do that for him? Man, please. And I can expect that from a non-Muslim crowd because it's not cool. It's not trendy for a woman to say, yes, I'm going to be obedient to my husband. But that love is ta'ah, that's found in the tradition. Now, what do you want me to do as a da'i? Do you really want me just to kind of shove it under the rug and convince you and myself that it's not the time for it because it's not cool to talk about? Or do you want me to bring it to light? Now, of course, if you talk about it, you have to use wisdom. I talked about this myself at a local masjid, and I brought up basically how a man should be towards his wife. And then I brought up that concept. But that idea, for instance, going back about the da'is, right? What gets me also is that why is it that you'll have certain da'is, may Allah reward them for all their work, is that they'll talk about certain things about how to be good to a woman, how to love a woman, how to rub her feet. And I have absolutely no problem doing that. But for me as a man, a married person, it's not going to take from my manhood to, for instance, do these things he's talking about, whether caressing the feet, massage, being good, going the extra mile, gentle, sweet, passionate, considerate. I am all for that. Hope you do, hooray, right? But why don't we see the other way around where, okay, well, how about if you talk about a woman massaging her husband's feet? Is that all of a sudden it becomes misogyny?
Whoa.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Why? Why is that? That's my question.
That's the question. Exactly what I was saying. Like, it's like, okay, a woman will obey her boss at work, but then she won't bring tea for her husband because she's not his servant. What?
I mean, look, if a husband is okay with that and the wife, she's okay with that, that's fine, right?
Sure,
but
yeah.
my thing is, if I think, like, for instance, that this topic should be covered because it is rarely covered. I never recall walking into a masjid and hearing a khatib speaking about this very topic. People don't want to hear it. I know it's not a popular topic, but why are you mad at? My question is, why are you mad at me? This is my question, because look, we all pride, especially millennials, we all pride ourselves on being just, being forthcoming, being honest, being upright, seekers of truth, bearers of truth, holding the torch of truth. These are bold claims to make. But when I just say that your prophet said A, B, C, X, Y, Z about, and the word is ta'a, right? The word in Arabic, it's obedience. Like, I cannot twist and manipulate that word and use linguistic sophistry and put it through this mechanism, and all of a sudden it's not obedience anymore. Like, why are you mad at me? And when we think of obedience, we think of all of a sudden that registers with some people like, oh, now the man in return has to be a complete jerk and this totalitarian figure at home and this authoritative dictator at home. No one said that. But this is the way it's registering with certain people. And the question again is, why are you mad at the messenger? Like, if I just said, again, with adab, with a smile, not being judgmental, as they would say, and just saying, hey, your messenger said A, B, C, X, Y, Z. Why will you leave the masjid thinking that I'm the jerk and I shouldn't be given khutbah there anymore? Just as an example. It hasn't happened, but just as an example.
Yeah, that makes that is the question. But yeah, I think you worded it nicely. Why is this the way it is? And I don't know. I think it's probably because khatibs avoid it, and then that avoiding the topic kind of feeds it more. You know what I mean? It kind of makes it more of a taboo.
It doesn't make it. I don't think it helps. It doesn't help at all. It doesn't make things better at all because
it makes it worse. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
It makes it worse, doesn't it?
It makes it worse for many reasons. One reason is that if you talk about it, but the mainstream speakers are not talking about it, then all of a sudden you become the jerk.
Yeah.
But why? Like, I mean, here, okay, look at it this way, right? You have person A who's telling you how it is. Mm-hmm. Hey, there's 5 fingers here. Okay. Another person comes along and gives you 4 fingers, right? But they have 5, right? And this might be an immature analogy here. The point I'm trying to get at is that you're mad at me for telling you that, hey, these are really 5 fingers. But you're not mad at the person who's telling you, no, I really got 4 fingers when they really got 5, right? I mean, do you want us are you guys looking for khatibs Or are you guys looking for actors? I mean, do you want me just to play along and act like that? Oh, that's not there. That's not important. You know, let's just kind of close our eyes. That's not really important. I mean, again, why are you mad at the messenger? Women are being abused, men are being abused out there, and no one agrees that abuse in itself should be tolerated. We all agree that abuse in all its forms should not be tolerated. But that in itself, when we talk about that topic, I mean, the very man you love, the very man you place on a pedestal said this. Unless you disagree with that and you believe it's not authentic, I mean, that's a secondary discussion. But people are telling you this is what your messenger said. Again, why are you mad at the khatib? But when one person speaks about it, and the other popular speakers or the celebrity speakers, as you would call them, they don't want to talk about it. It's kind of like this. I think this is doing more damage than it is good, because we're not giving them the full picture of what Islam again is.
Yeah, just to elaborate on your point, do you think, like you said, it does more damage than good, right? Do you think it's because when the mainstream doesn't speak about it, it kind of creates pockets of other people that speak about it, and then those guys become the weird ones or like the crazies?
Very good. Absolutely. I think it creates a huge space, and it creates a huge divide amongst the speakers themselves, that this speaker, instead of being embraced, and instead of him being praised for at least speaking the truth, he's actually shunned for it. And the other person who's kind of picking and choosing and being selective with the content and with the Islamic literature, all of a sudden now is praised. I mean, this, again, I've been in the dawah for years now, and I've yet to hear this very topic. I've heard many times, and I've personally preached about this myself, and it's on my Facebook Live video, by the way, about how men should be good to women, how they should respect, honor women, be good to women, go the extra mile for women, how they should treat their wives the same way they want their daughters someday to be treated, right? I think this is very commonsensical, right? But when you talk about this subject, it's like, no, that's a no-no. You don't talk about that topic, right? Irrespective of how well and eloquent and nice and kind your approach is, that's just one of those, no, that's a red line topic you don't talk about. But if we're going to talk about being good to the woman and going the extra mile for the woman, all of a sudden that's just completely embraced, it's accepted, and you can even make a series about that. And the question is, is that fair?
Yeah, I would say that's definitely not just. Like, I think it does more harm than good, like you said earlier. And I think this it's not only specific to those topics, but I think this kind of in general goes back to just cherry picking certain things because you don't want to push people away, right? And
it's also like the khatibs, like afterwards, like you go, the khatibs, they might ask the jama'ah like, oh, how do you think I did after they gave the khutbah, right? Because there's a lot of ego attached to it. Like, they don't want to be seen as the bad guy.
I mean, no one does. When I give a khutbah, I'm not hoping that I got more enemies than I did before getting on the minbar. Allah is my witness. No one wants to make enemies at the khutbah. But, look, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the very beginning of Surah Al-Baqarah, all of you are familiar with this verse when he's talking about the children of Israel. He says, أَفَتُؤْمِنُونَ بِبَعْضِ الْكِتَابِ وَتَكْفُرُونَ بِبَعْضِ. Do you believe in some of the book while rejecting other parts of it?
Mm-hmm.
Allah is telling us, right? Like they say, and that means that you have to take this book in its entirety, right? And even when it talks about, for instance, and that's a lesson for us Muslims. Allah is telling us, do not be like those who went before you, O Muslims, where they took parts of the book and they left out other parts of it, and they rejected other parts. In other words, what's suitable for them, what they feel is relevant, they'll take and apply. But what they feel is not relevant, and it's not popular, and it's not widely accepted, then we're going to turn around and completely turn our backs on it, right? For instance, even the hadith where it talks about a woman that, if her man has his needs, and then she should drop what she's doing and attend to that, then if not, then there are consequences involved, right? You never hear those hadith, and I find it to be misleading for some of the people. Here we just got to hammer we got to basically hammer the men, with, you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to do, and I'm okay with that. If it's truth, I'm okay with it. And this is how all of us should be. We should all be like that. If it's truth, if Allah said it, if the messenger said it, I should not have a problem with it myself. right? It's easy to discredit the people. It's easy to discredit the approach. It's easy to discredit the person. It's easy to discredit the methodology. It's very easy to do that. But at the end of the day, is it just possible that I have a problem with that? And if I do, I have to do a lot of soul searching. Like if I heard the Prophet say something that doesn't resonate well with me and it doesn't fit well with me, I should have a problem with myself. Look, I got some rectifying to do between me and Allah. I have to rectify my situation. But we shouldn't just, because it's tarnishing other people's reputation, and that's consequential, right? That's not easy in the sight of Allah.
Right. Yeah. So I remember earlier in the podcast we talked about how some people, how some of these khatibs and da'is, they like to talk about the good things to motivate people. However, not all people are the same, right? Some people are actually motivated by discipline, right, or consequences. So could you share your insights on that, Sheikh?
Very good. That's a very good point. What works for you doesn't work for the person next to you, and what might work for the person next to you might not work for you, right? So people are motivated by different reasons, and people are pushed off or dissuaded by many reasons as well, right? So what works for you doesn't work for the person next to you. And I think that in itself overlooks a great number of people who are a part of that congregation. In other words, when someone comes up to you, for example, and says, "You turned my daughter away." To be honest, I've never had this before. Or "You pushed my son away from the masjid because you mentioned this hadith, you stated this verse," and so on and so forth. One has to think of, well, what about those people who made tawbah that day because of that verse that they never heard before? Or what about that brother who for the first time hears a hadith and says, "SubhanAllah, I was never aware that any hadith existed like this. Today is my day where I'm going to turn around and I'm going to repent back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala." So for us to look at those people who didn't take it well, what about those people who took it very well, and it kind of shook them and it affected them and it resonated so much with them that was the day where now they opened up and started a new page. So I find that to be a bit, a bit inconsiderate, if you will, that we're looking at one sector, but we're completely abandoning and overlooking another sector. And it's as if we're kind of careless about them. Well, okay, maybe this didn't work for you. Maybe it didn't work for your son, your daughter, but what about those people it did work for? Do we not consider them? Like, are they not important factors in the equation? I think they are.
Yeah, that's an interesting way of putting it. Because like you said, what if, like, you went that one time and there was like a hadith about the punishment for such and such sin, like, zina, let's say, or drinking, and then he reads about it, he learns, and then he's like, "Hey, I'm done with this," right? It affects him, right? And who are we to say, like, "Hey, this method is not effective"? It works for that person.
For instance, right? Like the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? He talks about, there's a hadith, right, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam talks about the people who will be punished, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, "Alladhina yanamun an as-salat al-maktuba," those people who intentionally sleep through the salat even after it's time, right? He talks about that they'll have a severe punishment. Now, a person who's basically very just nonchalant with the prayers, doesn't care, never considerate of the time, if all they hear is Allah's most gracious, most merciful, most gracious, most merciful, and the patting on the back, and you're doing a good job as it is, and whatever you do, turn back to Allah. And I agree, whatever you do, yes, we turn back to Allah, right? No one denies that. But if this is all this person keeps hearing, what's really going to shake him to realize that what this person is doing is actually severe in the sight of Allah? That, oh, you know what? I didn't know it was this real. I didn't know that I couldn't combine Dhuhr, Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, and Isha. I just go home after I'm shopping and I just pray all prayers and I'm done. Hey, hooray. Well, what if, no, it's not that easy, right? So you have, akhi, sometimes some people have to be shaken up. That person might thank you later for how real you kept it and how, engaging you were, while another person might look at you and say, "Hey, your khutbah just lacked so much wisdom. You turned me off because of your voice, because of your tone," which, hey, you can't satisfy everybody. But again, the question is, what about those who appreciate it? What about those whose lives are changed because of that hadith that you shared with him, that calls to action, right? So I think we have to keep them in mind.
Yeah, that call to action. could you like elaborate like a little bit more on that, like calling to action and why that's effective than just like Islam is mercy, Islam is love?
Well, it goes back to our whole topic about the Quran is you have two concepts, right? Incentive and deterrent. You have Jannah and Nar, and this even in life, right? You have for your job, you have the pros, you have the cons, you have the perks, you have the negatives. So Islam has to be, for Islam to truly be effective, that's the way the message has to be delivered. If we really want to touch everybody and anybody, because again, when you go to the masjid, you're dealing with a wide array of people, right? You have people where it's going to take them 2 or 3 times to be shaken up. You have people who you have to remind them of the mercy of Allah because they've done good, right? Because they've done bad. You have other people you have to shake them up. So people, you have to speak to people with different levels. Like if this is all they keep hearing every time they're in the masjid, they're just going to walk out. They're not going to feel a sense of shame. They're not going to feel a sense of guilt because they're hearing that, again, like Brother Fahad calls it, TeddyBearIslam, right? And so when you keep hearing that narrative time and time again, you're not creating a sense of urgency. But if you tell them, brother, if you keep doing that, Allah says ABC, the Prophet ﷺ says this, and Allah forewarns us, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us about this punishment awaiting those who backbite. Allah talks about those who are not considerate of their prayers, of those who do not dress Islamically, and the list goes on and on. You might have one sister that says, oh my God, that was so judgmental, and the list goes on and on. You might have another sister who says, SubhanAllah, I was never made aware that this is not part of the hijab, or you can't wear this, or you can't dress in this certain attire. She might appreciate it and walk out and say, Jazakallah khair, Sheikh, I never knew that. No one ever told me that. Another sister might walk out and think you're just a judgmental, ostentatious. So people are different. And I think we as du'at, as speakers, have to remember that people don't work the same way.
Yeah. That's
there was this
nice
one, there was this one, I think it was a hadith or riwayah, correct me if like I don't know exactly where the source is, but it's when Allah says destroy this qawm beginning with this man. You know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I believe Ibn al-Qayyim talks about this in Miftah Dar al-Sa'ada. He basically talks about how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala it's a narration that Allah was going to destroy a nation, and then Jibreel tells Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, Inna fiha rajulan abid, that this town has an elderly person, a worshipper. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells him, فَبِهِ فَابْدَأْ فَإِنَّ وَجْهَهُ لَمْ يَتَمَعَّرْ مِنَ الْمُنْكَرِ. I believe that's the narration, that Allah tells him start with him because his face, like it did not change because of the munkar, the mischief that was taking place around him. You know, so it didn't bother him. He was just worshiping, minding his own business. And that's the other thing too, is that we can't perpetuate this narrative of just, oh, well, it doesn't concern me, let bygones be bygones. And that's kind of what the whole Muslim convenience card is about, is that we have to really get out of this mindset of, well, who are you to judge me? Who am I? I mean, part of being a Muslim is that if I err, if I make a mistake, come and correct me. I have to be okay with that. That's part of being a Muslim.
Yeah, I think you just reminded me of isn't there a verse that talks about enjoining what is good, prohibiting what is evil? Like you are the best of nations because you worship Allah, and you enjoy what is good. I think.
Even though I'd love if we can have like a full episode for that as well. We can talk about that. But yeah, كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس تأمرون بالمعروف وتنهون عن المنكر وتؤمنون بالله. You were the best of nations brought out to mankind for 2 reasons, or 3. You enjoin what is good, you forbid what is evil, and you believe in Allah.
Yeah, exactly. So if right now we have that enjoining what is good, we have that missing. And no, sorry, prohibiting what is evil. And it doesn't mean like go be a hater and you should do it with wisdom, but we forget doing it with wisdom. We're not doing it at all.
And that's the other thing too, is when you talk, I think I couldn't have said it. I could not have said it better when you said we're not doing it at all. And again, that's because our definitions have changed. That when you do that, that's defined as being judgmental, arrogant. You're condemning someone to hell. You think you're better than them. You think you're Mr. Know-it-all. And and it's never been like that. At least according to the Muslims who went before us. That was part of their deen. It was a fundamental belief to give advice and to tell someone if they're wrong, of course, with etiquette, with adab, and so on and so forth. It's not about looking for people's faults. But these things have to be addressed, especially when it becomes a communal problem. You have to address it at the minbar, right? Like if you have a problem in your community, for instance, with adultery, you don't sit there and talk about the blessings of dhikr and saying La ilaha illallah 100 days. Yeah, dhikr is important, but when you have an adultery problem in your community, you don't sit there and talk about how wonderful dhikr is when you have a problem at this great of a scale.
Yeah, yeah, right. Talk about the issues, because ignoring them is not going to make them go away.
Yeah.
Especially if it's relevant, if it's something that's it's affecting, it's harming your direct community. You can't talk to them about things that are just completely far from that, right? You have to talk about that which is it's urgent, it's needed.
Right.
Yeah, could you give an example of how you've done that in your community?
Yes. For instance, in my community, and I think this is not just, I don't think it's in our own community per se. I think this is all around, where you have Muslims selling cigarettes, Muslims selling liquor, Muslims selling pork, Muslims, cheating the government. And I brought it up. I said, look here, Muslims, we cannot sit and lie to one another and tell ourselves that we're worshiping Allah, and we come here and we say, oh, Allah give us victory, and we are lying and conniving, and we justify to ourselves that it's okay. Whether it be lying on our taxes, whether it be selling the forbidden things to the non-Muslims, and we justify to ourselves that, oh, they're non-Muslim, or we lie on our paperwork, right? We say that we're taking care of 2 or 3 kids at a daycare, when in reality, there's no daycare, no one's taking care of anybody, and we're getting grants and money from the government, and then we go around, and it's like, guys, this is haram. We cannot continue doing this, and we cannot continue to act like this is not happening. It's obvious it's happening, and everybody knows it's happening. But whose responsibility is it to bring this to light? It's the khatib, it's the imam, it's the person responsible. So it's a huge responsibility. It is immense. And that's why I tell any young ones coming up and learning, you have to either be okay and assume such a responsibility, and I don't want to sound harsh here, or do something else for a living.
No,
Really.
I mean,
Makes sense.
are, at least khatibs and leaders, they're very reluctant to start conflict within their community. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm reluctant.
So
I don't want conflict. I don't want it. I don't feed off of it. Like, I don't get off of a khutbah and say, whew, mashallah, I got more enemies today. I really made them feel bad. No one wants it. But
I wanted to share a story of Umar bin Khattab when he was Khalifa. Can I share it? So,
yeah, please.
So Umar bin Khattab radiallahu anh, once saw a man speaking to a woman on the roadside. He began to beat him with his stick and asked the man why he was shamelessly speaking to a woman on the roadside. The man answered that the woman was his wife. Umar radiallahu anh then said, why are you discussing your personal matters by the roadside and enticing the people to listen to your personal conversation? He answered, O leader of the believers, we have just arrived in Medina, and we're discussing where we should stay. When Umar radiallahu anh heard his answer, he apologized to the man, gave him his stick, and ordered him to take his revenge. The man said, I forgive you for the sake of Allah. However, Umar insisted that the man take the stick and seek out his revenge, but the man refused every time. Thereby, Umar radiallahu anh said, your reward will be with Allah. And it's in Akhbar Umar in page 190.
Subhanallah. Times are definitely different. Let's just say that.
Yeah, we can't do that now.
But here, let me say this, right? For instance, that is true. That is true. But again, that comes to the pros and cons, right? Your job description is you're going to take it all. You're going to take the perks, and you're going to take the backlash that comes with it, right? No one goes. I don't think anybody goes on the minbar in the hopes of making more enemies because they spoke the truth. But speaking the truth is probably not going to leave you many friends.
No, not at all.
No one does it. No one wants to be spoken ill of. But when you speak the truth, and this is obvious, right? When you speak the truth, it's not going to sit well. It's not going to resonate with a lot of people. But that's just the nature of the beast, right? That's just the nature of how things work, right?
If your friend asks you, do I look fat? If you tell him the truth, he's not going to be your friend, right?
It depends.
I mean, if he was a true friend, he would tell you the truth that you are fat, right?
Yeah, for your own good, looking out for your own good. Yeah.
But if he was just seeking your approval, rather, what would he do? He would just say, no, you don't look fat. You look wonderful.
Yeah, and make you feel good about yourself. It's kind of funny, and I want to mention that boy who they were clapping for. I mean, only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and I know some people might think this is judgmental, but I think this is just, I think it's a shame and it's embarrassing. You had that obese, overweight child on that TV show, and he was talking about how much he eats and how much, and people are just applauding for him. I'm like, oh my goodness, you guys are destroying this young man.
Yeah, exactly. You're harming him.
You're setting him. I don't know where it was, but everybody was just getting such a great. I'm not gonna lie, it was humorous, but I mean, when you think about it thoroughly, it's not humorous at all. That's scary. We're setting this child up for failure and for destruction. Like, he's going to destroy his body if he does not change in the foreseeable future here, right? And everybody's just laughing about how much he eats and how much he likes chicken and meat and stuff like that. And the audience was just applauding and applauding and more applauding. And I'm just like, that's not good. He doesn't need that. He needs someone to tell him, of course, with wisdom and charisma and compassion and love and etc. That's a giver, right? We all know when you give nasiha, because everybody, well, I know, but there's a way of giving nasiha. I agree. Let me go back to one thing before I do forget, right? You know, we were talking earlier about how Allah says to Bani Israel, he talks about, قُلْ أَفَتُؤْمِنُونَ بِبَعْضِ الْكِتَابِ, do you believe in some of the book and you don't believe in the other? Now, sometimes what I like to do with my own congregation is I try to tell them, I try to use them as part of the analogy, right? Imagine if, for instance, you, Brother Ammar, or for instance, you, Brother Fahad, right? You gave me a wasiyah, you gave me a document, and you told me someday later on, I want you to read this to my kids if I pass on or something happens to me. Now, how would you take it if I read to your kids only half of the page that you wrote for me? Do you think that would be fair, and would that be something you would appreciate?
Not at all. Not at all.
No.
Fahad, both of you answer. I want you guys' answer, right? I'm not reading the whole thing. You gave me a full paper. I only read half of it, for whatever reason it is, right? How would you feel about that? But you told me, like, Yusuf, I want you to read the full paper. And I want you both to kind of provide an answer.
I would probably,
Sorry,
I wouldn't like it because I created that document with the intention that the people who are reading, with the intention that people read through the whole thing. That's why I wrote it to begin with. Because the very
okay,
fact, sorry.
What if something was there that was going to make my daughter or my son, for example, feel very, very uncomfortable? In other words, it was a mistake that I made in the past, or something that I did and I just couldn't continue living with it, but I wanted to come out clean after I die, for whatever reason that is, right?
Good.
But I told you, I said, Fahad, make sure, I want you to read for them everything in this paper. Wouldn't you feel that it's your religious duty, it's just your duty in general to convey the full message?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah,
definitely. Ammar, what's your answer?
What's my answer?
Yeah.
So like, if I gave you something and I said, hey, read this, and then you only read half of it for whatever reason, I would be disheartened and disappointed, because if I wrote that and I died, and there were certain things I wanted to be said, I need all of it to be said, and maybe there's something that's missing that they don't get, and like, I have no way of, you were like my only hope of doing that. So if that message doesn't reach them, then what I intended will be lost.
Yeah, and that's the analogy I'm trying to say. I think that's what we're, see, you know what's kind of funny is sometimes we deal with Allah in such a way that we ourselves resent, that we don't like, right? For instance, we don't want anybody to do that to us, but we're going to turn around and do that with the book of Allah.
Yeah, no, I understand, yeah. Like,
you know what I mean? We don't want people mincing our words. We don't want people, taking out of context what we say, but we're going to turn around and do kind of the same thing with Allah. When we don't know that, no, if it's in the Quran, it must be an effective method of reaching out to the hearts of people.
Yeah.
Precisely.
Yeah. Like you said in the Quran, he mentions Jannah and Jahannam together, reward and punishment together. And there must be a reason for mentioning it that way. Because part of the Quranic miracle is the linguistic miracle. And part of that is going to be part of da'wah.
No.
So yeah.
we've kind of hammered the point quite hard that Teddy Bear Islam is an issue, okay, that it exists. What would you say us laymen should do about it? Like we don't really have much power within our Muslim communities. I mean, do we really? I don't know.
No, forget power. Like as a Muslim who wants to, keep he wants to study, who wants to, wants to learn the deen, but also wants to, stay firm. And what can we do in our communities to,
eliminate Teddy Bear Islam?
Yeah, or offer, what's the practical steps to offer, the correct message or the full message of Islam?
Very, very good. I don't know. It's going to take a concerted effort. It's going to take first create an awareness, number one. And number two, we as Muslims, and I hate to say this, we have to mature. Really, and I know this doesn't sound positive, but we have to mature. Like these ad hominem attacks, attacking people simply for delivering a message, attacking people for simply just saying the truth and using alibis of, well, it wasn't the right time and it was aggressive and that wasn't the right approach. And it's like, is it more than that, or is that really the problem? We ourselves have to be okay. Hey, if this is Islam, it's an authentic hadith, it's a verse in the Quran, I have to be okay with it. Like I have to work on myself to the point where now that it's being said, I don't have a problem with it. I worked on myself.
So we should be self-reflective and self-aware that, hey, yes, I need to realize this is from Allah. Well, Allah knows us best. So what He has made halal is good. What He has prohibited what He has made haram is bad. So I should accept what He says because He knows us better than we know ourselves.
Yeah.
Hey, we're living in a system. Our system today is when you're always patted on the back. Oh, hey, you've done a great job. Hey, you've done a wonderful job. Hey, you've done a remarkable job. Hey, keep it up. If that's what you're always hearing, and no one comes to you and says, hey, you know what? I really have some criticism. I don't think this is good. I don't think this is going for you. And whatever the criticism might be, if you're not used to that, you're not going to take it well.
Yeah.
So what happens if you're being complimented all the time, and no one stops you and says, actually, I don't think this is right. You're not going to take it well simply because you're not used to it.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So we as Muslims, once again, we have to, I think, refamiliarize ourselves with what is in the hadith or prophetic tradition. So for instance, I as a Muslim, if I find a hadith that doesn't sit well with me and it has to do with gender equality or women doing that or women doing this, and it's in the Quran or it's in the prophetic tradition and it's authentic, I can't start attacking now the speaker or the sheikh simply because they used that as proof or they just simply shared it. That's immature of us to do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So we have to rise up to the occasion. We have to be okay. Hey, this is my religion. It's in the Quran. It's in the authentic tradition. I have to be okay with it. I have to be, whether I'm at an MSA, whether I'm at the university, I'm at the masjid, and that's why there's this whole divide now. Well, don't say this on the university campus, but say it at the masjid. It's like, whoa, why? I mean, I understand you're dealing with university students, but what, they get a special Quran, and those at the masjid, they get a special Quran?
Mm-hmm. I mean, for example, discussing issues related to homosexuality, for example, that's not taken lightly at the university, right? Like if you want to talk about the actual Islamic position, that it's actually it's haram.
And you know what's funny is this, for us Muslims at least, it is somewhat of a new phenomena, this term controversial topic. Like for us Muslims, this is relatively new.
Right.
Like for 1400 years and on, it's never been there was no such thing as a controversial subject that we deem controversial today, right?
Okay.
For instance, hijab, that was never considered a controversial subject. About the women obeying their husbands, this was never considered a controversial subject. The gender differences, the gender duties between both genders, that was never considered a controversial topic. Homosexuality, that was never considered a controversial topic. You find that it's our context and our milieu, and that's why it's viewed as a controversial topic. But then again, as I mentioned earlier, if you all remember, if I'm speaking to a Muslim audience, why is that still controversial?
Yeah, that's a good point. I think
I'm confused myself.
Yeah, I think what you said, the earlier point you mentioned about being self-aware. When you have a problem with something, we should ask ourselves, instead of questioning the legitimacy of it, we should question our own assumptions. We should question our own paradigm before we project it onto Islam, right? Like why do I think this is wrong, right?
It's not, and it's not just wrong. It's not. Remember, what's happening, Ahmad, is not that you're saying it's wrong.
It makes you, yeah.
You're not accepting it, but you have a list of alibis that you convince yourself that you're going to get away from receiving or acting upon this truth now that's new to you, but you're going to use alibis to get away from it, to make yourself feel good and to perpetuate the wrong that you're doing. So as I mentioned earlier, oh, he was being negative. Oh, that was just too aggressive. The approach turned me off. Well, why did he have to say it like that? Was this the right time to say it? Was this the right place to say it? So we'll use these alibis, but at the end of the day, what all this means is that, hey, I'm not accepting it. But I'm going to throw this list up as an alibi. You get where I'm going with that?
Yeah. You're basically, from what I understand, some people, like, they'll basically, if they don't like it, they'll just make justifications for why to deny it.
Instead of holding themselves accountable.
Instead of holding themselves accountable, yeah. Because it makes them feel bad.
Okay, hold on. No. The Khatib is the Khatib. He delivered the message. Why do I have a problem with this? I have to work on myself. It's easy, like they say, it's easy to point a finger and you got, what, 3 coming back at you, right?
Yeah.
This is what it reminds me of. And that's what I'm saying. It's very easy to kind of use these alibis to get away and hold it. But self-accountability has to be brought back to the table. We have to introduce ourselves once again to self-accountability and stop playing these, oh, well, you didn't say it the right way and you were awfully loud and that was a turn off and you shouldn't have said it at that setting, and well, that's because these people were here, and the list goes on, and it's like you can never get it right.
Yeah, and even if those things are true, that doesn't discredit, like, if I'm like smoking like a cigar or cigarette or like drugs or something or weed or something, and you're like, hey, that's haram, and someone says to me, hey, that's haram in an aggressive way, that doesn't, like, okay, sure, you're aggressive about it, I'm still in the wrong. Like,
and even on Judgment Day, if Allah's going to ask you about, do you know this is haram, you're not going to say, yeah, Allah, I knew it was haram, but I did not want to act on it because the Khatib was kind of aggressive and being negative. Like, do you really think Allah's going to say, you know what, you're right, let me go punish him, and you're recused, right?
Yeah, and just for like our viewers, he's not saying be aggressive. He's obviously saying you should do it with wisdom. But we're not even having these conversations, right? So to start is we need to have those conversations.
And again, I think we shouldn't conflate the two, right? I think people will say it as being negative.
Let's say passionate.
Yeah, that's exactly it. You're being compassionate. You're passionate. You're excited about it, And if why is it that it's okay for us to get moved for our parents? Like when our parents are disrespected, if our mothers are disrespected, our fathers, our kids, our wives, our husbands, our family members, like we show the world that we're disappointed. But when it comes to Allah, we're just supposed to, have a numb heart and just be nonchalant and just be, why is it okay for us to get mad for those relatives we love? But when it comes to being passionate for the sake of Allah, that's frowned on. Like, again, that's duplicity.
Yeah,
it's understandable, right? When someone disrespects your mother in public, it is absolutely normal for you to throw a fit.
Yes.
Whether it be, hey, you watch your mouth, and who do you think you're talking? Like, that's understandable. No one's going to accuse you of being aggressive, right? That's normal. It's the nature of where you're at, the context. But when you get excited for Allah because Allah now is being disrespected, that doesn't sit well, and I don't think that's right.
Yeah, like we need to be introspective. Oh, would you say earlier, like like you said, we should ask ourselves why, and also, do you think the way forward? This kind of goes back to the community question that, like, as laymen, we should work on ourselves, our family, and our the people closest to us. You know, like, is that the way forward?
The first thing I think that needs to be created, there needs to be awareness created for to kind of create awareness that this is becoming a problem. That we have to first realize that, no, this is a problem, where we have to be selective and talk about, you know, subjects that are going to make people feel good about themselves, and all of a sudden things are going to take people out of their comfort zone. We're going to, you know, overlook that. This in itself has to be corrected. Like, we have to first realize that we're forging for ourselves a kind of mentality and a kind of psyche that's doomed to fail later on.
But okay, but then some people would say, and I've heard of people in communities like this, well, this is 21st century America. If you don't like it here, go back to Saudi Arabia. Like, all these things. As long as we pray, we don't care. Blah blah blah. So certain, like, you know, they bring up these points. They just don't want to. They just want to basically live and let live. Like, I'll pray and then whatever. I don't care. Like,
yo, Ammar, but like, part of being a Muslim is, I mean, that's the definition. You're submitting to Allah, right?
Yeah.
Allah wa qala Rasul. Like, Allah says, and whatever, like, and the Prophet says, and then, like, you're supposed to just, like, obey it.
Yes.
Right. So.
I mean, I wish it was easy, and I wish it was that simplistic. Allah and His Messenger said, "Khalas." I wish it was that easy. Goodness gracious, but it's so far from that, you know.
I mean, as a khatib, probably one of the solutions is, because like my friends within our MSA, they are khatibs for our jama'ah. So I would probably suggest to them now is that every time they're about to give a something that the audience may not like to hear, something that goes against TeddyBearIslam, is that I didn't say this myself, our Prophet said this, or Allah said this. Okay, and just be clear that, like, basically putting the blame not on yourself, but moving the blame somewhere else, so that way they won't say, they won't come after you afterwards. Does that make sense?
But I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, I think you're being awfully optimistic and perhaps Pollyannish right now, because that's exactly what I tell people to do. I say, look, say it with wisdom, say it with charisma, say it with love, say it with compassion, say it with a nice smiley face. I'm okay, but just say it. That's all we're asking. Just say it. You know, just let the people know that, hey, the Prophet ﷺ said this, or the Prophet ﷺ said that. You know what I mean? Say it in the best way you feel, but it has to be
say it. Yeah, and like, and if you truly love, and if you want good for the people, you will say it, right? You care about them, right? Just, like, that's why you'll say it, because you'll want the truth for them if you care about them.
Precisely. Yes, precisely.
So you mentioned raising awareness, and then I guess, like, being more introspective.
But I think there's a false wisdom out there, and that is that, hey, if you talk about these topics, you're gonna push people away.
You disagree with that?
Oh, big time.
But wouldn't you necessarily push people away, right? Like, some of the people, they're gonna be turned off by it necessarily, right?
You're gonna have some people pushed away, but to what degree are we going to allow that plausibility and that possibility to dictate for us what we do now?
Yeah, you're right. You're being controlled by the few that do disagree, because
it's a possibility. You might turn people off, but that kind of, again, it comes to kind of that maturity and having that self-accountability of, because if everybody's going to say, if every khatib or if every speaker is going to say, well, don't talk about those topics because they're controversial, well, they're a part of Islam for a reason, and this has to be shared with the general public. The people at least have to know. For instance, right? But for instance, homosexuality, right? It's very, very obvious that it's impermissible in Islam to engage in this kind of activity. Now, you might have a parent, you know, might come along and say, oh, well, you know what? I don't think you should have talked about it. But let me ask you, would you rather, dear parent, have your kid know very clearly about the verdict of homosexuality in Islam. He hears it from me. He hears it from another person. He hears it from the ICNA convention. He hears it from the ISNA convention. He hears it at another conference. So he's ingrained. He knows that, you know what, this is just a big no-no for me, right? Or is it that your kid never hears about it? He's confused about it, and he grows up and he himself becomes a homosexual. Now, are you going to be mad at the khatib, or are you going to thank the khatib? I think you'd have a lot of beef with those khatibs out there, because you'd probably hold a lot of the khatibs there to blame, right? They're part of the blame. Well, you guys didn't do a good enough job of explaining to myself how this is just a no, no, no in Islam.
Right.
So, I mean, it's very implicative. It's not just easy to say don't talk about it. And sometimes it has to happen to us for us to wake up and realize, you know what, you were right. Maybe we should have talked more about it. Because when we have a personal experience, when that happens to us, our whole vision and concept of just life in general just completely changes.
Mm-hmm.
And homosexuality is just one of the many examples out there, by the way.
Yeah,
we can go on and on and on with examples.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah.
Like, for example, hudud. We can go on about, like, you just like, give me some examples.
I mean, the hudud is one of the examples. Homosexuality, we talked about it earlier. Hijab, enjoining what is good and forbidding what is evil. You know, I mean, that in itself is just, it's dreadful. Like, you're talking to Muslim students at a college, and they're just looking at you like, what are you talking about? What a judgmental. You know, like, well, why are you guys looking at me like that? Just as an example, you see. But I think it can backfire, because here's the thing: is that Islam has two things, right? It has musallamat and mutaghayyirat. Musallamat, these are things that are accepted. Ma'lum min ad-din bil-darura. These things are accepted by consensus of all scholars that it's permissible or it's impermissible.
Yeah. Like hijab, right? For example.
Yeah, hijab is musallamat. No scholar, reputable scholar, has ever said that, oh, it's just cultural, it's not really necessary. No reputable scholar has ever made a claim, right? So you have today, for instance, when we talk about homosexuality, so for the hijab, people will come along and say, oh, it's just cultural. I heard that on NPR News myself, and I was just outraged, right? And then you have another person who says, no, homosexuality is not necessarily forbidden in Islam. What's forbidden in Islam is for a man to coerce another man into having that intercourse. That's what's forbidden in Islam.
Yeah, that goes into like reformation and reinterpreting and stuff.
That's the problem. Even though Muslims have agreed all along across the board, regardless of their religious affiliation or their circles, that this is just not permissible. You have a Muslim today growing up, never hears this on the minbar, never. And all he heard is some guy talking about, well, as long as you don't pressure another man, what's impermissible is for a man technically to rape another man, basically. But if it's consensual, then it's okay. And when you hear that, you really think that, because you grew up with a lot of these other concepts alongside of it, right? That, oh, it's okay, and, you know, freedom of choice, and these concepts that they seem very catchy, and they lure you in, right? And so when you look at it like that, you don't have a problem with it. And that's why we have to get out of this false wisdom that, oh, it's going to turn people off, and don't talk about it, just bring them to the masjid. And I mean, we have to clarify things to them, especially if these are relevant issues, right? Like homosexuality, for instance.
But like, also some topics at a minbar, they're just kind of distasteful rather than controversial. Like for example, say your community has a pornography problem, right? Would you talk about that in front of your jama'ah?
Yes, for one reason.
You should.
Yeah, I don't want to. And again, you have to be very selective
over there as well. So
no, right. But here's the thing. I mean, with the day and age that we're living today, it's just unbelievable, the information that these kids already know.
Yeah. As well as like for example, women are also there, kids are there. Do you really want to be talking about a topic like that?
If it's truly a topic that's touching the community, where the imam gets a lot of complaints about this, the parents are complaining, and it comes from more than one source, then I think it's imperative to talk about that. Of course, you have to be selective with your words. You have to be implicit sometimes if you can. You don't want to be too gratuitous, right? You can't be like that, but it has to be brought up, just so at least like for the shabab that, hey, you know what, you can be watching on that, Malik al-Maut comes to you, what do you say to Allah? You wake up meeting Allah, you know, and you see Allah, and here you are, you because you're resurrected in the same state that you die in. So if you die praying, that's how you meet Allah. If you die watching porn, that's how you meet Allah. I mean, is that really what you want for yourself? You know, it's a multifaceted discussion. So
also, like, you know, the idea of being unapologetic, like being unapologetically Muslim, so many Muslims, they like to associate themselves with that idea,
but they're not unapologetically Muslim because they
hide this particular portion.
Yeah, they're just SJWs.
They hide everything else besides Teddy Bear Islam, right?
And here's the thing too, like, we're not, I don't want someone to listen to this and think that we're promoting, you know, being aggressive. We're promoting being considerate. We're promoting looking for people's faults. This has absolutely nothing to do with that. So for example, if someone's on his or her deathbed, right? They're in the throes of death. They're experiencing their last breaths. I'm not going to go to them and remind them of Allah's excruciating pain. I'm not going to go to them and remind them of Allah's eternal punishment or of Allah's wrath. That's not the place for that. The only thing I can have right now is remind them of the compassion and the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sorry. But there just needs to be a balance, and this is all we're asking for. It's spiraling out of control. It's getting out of control, and we're forging for ourselves a narrative that's probably going to do more harm in the foreseeable future than good.
Yeah, I think you mentioned that earlier about the points of the Muslimat and the idea of reformation. I think that's pretty much the Christians did they not? Did they not just keep what they liked and then remove what they didn't like? So it's very dangerous.
What's funny about Christianity is Christianity always seemed to, and this is something that really, really bothered me about Christianity, is that it always seemed to be in alignment with political trends. So for instance, it was popular, known, and acceptable in the 50s or 60s in America to be an anti-Semite. Like, that was cool. Like, you can be a preacher at the pulpit and preaching, you know, things about hating the Jews, and that was absolutely acceptable. Of course, as a Muslim, I'm not condoning that. I'm not saying that, hey, we should go do the same thing. But I'm saying, for instance, today you have these rainbow flags in front of the churches that say, oh, well, God loves everybody. God doesn't love everybody. I mean, when you say God loves everybody, God doesn't destroy those he loves. And well, God in the Old Testament showed us that he didn't destroy one person or one nation. He destroyed many people. So this concept of God loves everybody is completely fallacious.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, even that's another example of a topic that, you know, you wouldn't people would avoid or would be avoided.
Right. Another example is وَانْصُرْنَا عَلَى الْقَوْمِ الْكَافِرِينَ. That one.
I mean, here's the thing, right? Like, we're not asking for somebody. We're not asking for the khatib to go out there and talk about controversial, crazy subjects, so much so that he's probably going to have the FBI waiting for him outside.
No. What we're asking rather is to talk about topics that need to be talked about. That's it. That's all.
Yeah. Regardless of controversy, like, and have that balance.
Here. We don't need khatibs to get, you know, to become conspiratorial theory nuts, right? We don't need you to be conspiratorial with your subjects, and I think this, and they did this, and they put that, you know, because people are probably going to put you in that conspiracy box, and only Allah knows when you're ever going to get out. So don't put yourself as a khatib. Don't put yourself in harm's way. Don't get yourself intentionally in trouble. But that doesn't also mean that you don't speak the truth.
Right.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
just have the balance. I think it was like, wasn't there the Ibn Qayyim's analogy of the bird, of hope and fear? Maybe I know this goes into a different topic on itself, but hope is something good, fear is something that's like a little bit negative. So you can't be both.
It's in the same part, because you're talking about hope and fear. You're talking about incentive and deterrent. You're talking about reward and punishment. No, it is in the same realm. Yeah, you have to have, and you know what's kind of funny is that you have to have hope and fear, but if all your if all you're hearing throughout your sermons throughout the year, if 90% of what you're hearing is just patting on the back and just, hey, you're doing a good job, and you're not changing, there's no sense of urgency that's created, I think that's going to do harm to people. They're not going to feel that sense of guilt and shame. And that was something that's always praised, right? According to the Islamic tradition, is to have a sense of shame and guilt. Is you feel bad about yourself, like, you know what, I got to do better. I got to do more. I got to be more grateful. I got to push myself, and I got to exert myself. You don't want to baby your nafs. It becomes spoiled and rotten, right? And it does harm for you, than more harm than good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll go on. Even our prophet said, if you have no shame, then do as you please. Right. So shame is something that is shame and haya is some quality that's praiseworthy.
Yes. In our society, in our culture today, that's what I think we should have I think we should have another episode that talks about definitions, Muslim definitions, like what are our definitions? Because today it's all about being sassy. It's all about lacking haya. It's all about lacking modesty. It's all about, the whole world hearing who you are. It's all about, and it's just
apologetic.
Yeah.
Yeah. To add on to the point of shame, like the Sharia punishes public sins, not private ones. So that's why there's shame, right? Because when it's public, it influences everyone else to do the sins. But then when it's private, it's between you and Allah. That's why you feel shame. And if you do feel shame, you will stop. If you don't feel shame, if you're like, it's okay, blah blah blah, you won't stop.
Yeah, precisely. And I think this culture, it doesn't encourage us to have that kind of shame, because this culture is all about, well, who are you to judge? Which is true. It's true. In our culture, who are you to judge? I mean, you have a whole different, belief system than I do. Who are you to judge me? In other words, off of what basis? But we as Muslims, we can't use that amongst each other. We can't say, well, brother, who are you to judge me because I don't pray 5 times a day? No, all I'm saying is that it's haram. That's between you and Allah. But when I tell you it's haram to be doing that because you're not praying 5 times a day, that doesn't make me judgmental. My phone only has 5% on it, so I don't know how you guys want to do this. Yes, we do have chargers in Minnesota. We do.
I think we covered most things.
Yeah, let me try putting this in.
Would you have any suggestions for for khatibs and leaders within the community and celebrity imams? Any message out to them, maybe?
Wallahi, the only thing I can say is that
give them the full picture.
Popularity comes with a price tag. The more difficult it is, the greater the reward is, and I think that's what I can remind myself and others of. And everything comes with a price tag. To whom much is given, much is expected. I can never. The first time I heard that, it just, subhanAllah, it resonates with me till today. I think it's a biblical verse, but it's true. To whom much is given, much is expected. Of course, I hope a lot of the brothers who are on the crazy wala and barat thing don't accuse me of astaghfirullah and how can he quote that, and he's using the Bible as a reference, astaghfirullah.
So again, disclaimer: it's not a matter of belief; it's just a nice quote.
Yeah, it is, and it's true. It really is true. So yes, we all like the followers, and we all like the compliments, and we all like, but what's more important at the end of the day is preserving this religion. And those who's really going to preserve the religion, if the imams, speakers don't do it, I really don't know who else is going to do it.
Yeah, that's nicely put. I think that's a good place to stop. What do you think, Fahad?
Yeah, I agree. We need we need to get rid of teddy bear Islam. We need to make this bear a little bit more ferocious. Take away a bit of the stuffing from it. Make it grow in size. Feed it. Give some life to it. So hashtag.
And I'm optimistic. I'm optimistic we can, but it has to be a collective effort. It has to be a concerted effort. We have to realize that we're going down this path. Although we're convincing ourselves that it's of wisdom we're going down this path, we have to really realize that, is this really the path we want to go down? And we have to change before it gets too late, where we can't get back up the hill.
Precisely.
Yeah. Is there anything else you want to add, Sheikh?
No, I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to reward both of you for your time, for your energy, and for all that you guys do. And I also ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive all of our shortcomings, and to grant us the truth, and to grant us courage to keep spreading the truth, inshallah ta'ala. And this, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best.
I mean, yeah. Jazakallah khair for coming on. We know you're a busy man. You're imam, married, and you have a lot of stuff going on. So thank you for having us. Thank you for coming on our show. I highly appreciate it. No, I wanted to add, how can people reach you if they have any concerns? I don't know. Do we want people to reach you?
Yeah, sure. I have an email for compliments and an email for insults, so I'll give both of them. So no. If people want to reach me, they can reach me at Youssef@tabsiraproject.com. That's my email. For
How do you spell Youssef?
Youssef. So YOU, S as in Sam, E like Edward, F like Frank. Youssef at Tabsira Project. Tabsira is TABSIRA, and then the word project. So Youssef at tabsiraproject.com, or Youssef Soussi on the, and I'm sure you guys might have this even in the description box maybe later on. Youssef Soussi on Facebook too. You can find me there.
On Facebook. Okay. So
also,
Facebook.
Lastly, I just wanted to add that the Sheikh has a YouTube channel as well, in which he has YouTube videos. You're welcome to watch those videos and also support his Patreon as well, so that way he releases more videos. And these videos, they're small, they're very short, and they're very powerful as well, and very well edited. So, and they're meant to kind of become viral and influence the collective Muslim Western psyche. Wow, that's a nice word.
You're awfully smart, brother Fab. Goodness. So, I'm always stunned at your genius.
Wow. Yeah. So the Tabsira project, it's a project that's worth checking out as a YouTube channel. I would say the topics that you talk about it and the way that it is, it's kind of like Prager University. It's a bit unorthodox in terms of the way that it's delivered, and it's a project worth checking out and funding and supporting.
Yeah. Now, how much do I owe you for all that? Do I owe you something?
Another podcast.
No, you guys are awesome.
You can find Ammar on Twitter as well, at BroBuffBeard, BroBuffBeard. And you can find me at American Zabiha, so like at American Zabiha. So
yeah, pretty solid. Go follow us. Give us hate mail, fan mail, whatever you want. And on the last note, Youssef Soussi's videos are good, especially if you wanted more insight on Aisha Anha's age, or if you want to know what the Muslim convenience cards are. They're excellent. But with that note,
you're interest free, that's for sure.
that's 3. Oh yeah. There's another one.
Like, share, comment, subscribe, and
we're out.
All right, Jazakumullah khair, guys.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Salam.
That was good.